I go nuts for donuts. Yo, trust me that the irony of taking fat loss advice from a guy who goes by Porky is not lost on me. But I am pretty decent at losing fat. In 2023, I lost almost 50 pounds in just 8 months. Granted, most of it was from an overseas fat loss camp called a deployment. But regardless, this time around, I want to try and lose 60 pounds. Go ahead and sub to see that journey. But here are the tips that will help me and you lose this fat. First and foremost, a scale is not the end-all be-all. It only tells you how much you weigh. It doesn't differentiate between fat, muscle, or whatever else is in your body. I used an in-body tester a couple weeks ago, and that told me I was 275 pounds and that 37% of it was fat. So basically, within my 275 pounds, 101 pounds of it is fat. But 99 pounds of it is muscle. I would obviously want to try and lose that fat while maintaining or increasing that muscle mass. If you're unaware, you might look at the scale increasing as you work out because you're gaining muscle mass and maybe losing fat over time. But you see it going up, so you assume it's a bad thing. And you immediately go, it's time to diet, severe starvation. But you aren't looking at the full picture. You could be losing that positive weight rather than focusing on that negative weight loss. With that in mind, you might be thinking, well, then I can spot work out things and then I'll lose fat off from that area. But that's not true. You cannot choose where fat goes or where it comes from. Just because I could do side bends with 80s for 30 plus reps does not mean that I'm losing these love handles. Fat gets lost from everywhere over time. What gets measured gets managed is a big saying in the finance world to try and get people to budget. And it holds true here too, because monitoring your calories as closely as possible will help you lose fat faster. It's actually the best method to do so, because fat loss is as easy as calories in versus calories lost through exercise and living, and that equals fat loss or gain. You eat less calories, you lose weight. You burn more calories, you lose weight. If you eat more, but also burn more, then you kind of end up at an equilibrium. You can increase your calorie expenditure throughout the day by increasing your muscle mass too. I read a while ago that 10 pounds of muscle burns 1 pound of fat at rest per week. 1 pound of fat is 3,500 calories. Divided throughout 7 days means that each day is 500 calories of fat burned by 10 pounds of muscle. You divide those, you get 1 pound of muscle burns 50 calories. I'm almost 100 pounds of muscle. That would mean that I'm burning 5,000 calories a day at rest. Look at me. Look at it! Look at it! Look at it! I am not burning 5,000 calories a day at rest. I don't even think with my most locked in, cracked out workouts, I've ever burned 5,000 calories in a day. At best, I've burned a pound in a day, and that was because we went on a 9-hour hike up Mount Guadalupe. Current literature states that a pound of fat burns 2 calories per hour and a pound of muscle burns 6. So the more muscle you have, the more calories you're burning over time. It increases something called the basal metabolic rate, which is the calories you burn at rest at any given time. Besides just having more muscle, another method of burning calories is an obvious one: exercising. But not all exercises are created equal. Some exercises burn more calories than others do. So if you want to be as efficient as possible, you would pick an exercise that burns the most amount of calories. On screen here, I have a list of more common exercises and their MET values. What's a MET? A MET is a metabolic equivalent of task. It basically determines the vigorousness of an exercise. That way you can figure out and calculate with this equation how many calories you're burning per minute doing that exercise or activity. Walking at a 3-mile-an-hour pace is a value of 3.3. So for my weight, 275, which is around 120 kilograms, I would do 3.3 times 3.5 times 120, and then divide all that by 200. And I get about 6.93 calories per minute. Contrarily, running 8.6 miles an hour has a Met value of 12.3. So plug that into the equation and it pops out 25.83 calories a minute, almost 4 times what walking does. Basically, for every 4 minutes I would walk at that 3 mile an hour pace, I could run 8.6 miles an hour for just a minute and the calories would be about the same. If you want to find out your basal metabolic rate, you would just plug in 1 as a Met value into that equation and that gives you it. When choosing one of those exercises or activities to do, you would want to pick something that's maintainable for a long period of time. So if you want to walk 3 miles an hour for 2 hours, that would be better for you than trying to run 8.6 minutes for 30 minutes, because that's a pretty hard pace to maintain if you're not already used to doing something like that. I've put a link in the description for the Compendium of Physical Activities, which is essentially a huge list of anything you can think of, from cleaning up around the house, gardening, playing an instrument, and obvious things like sports and exercise, and their Met values. Going back to how many calories are in a pound of fat, 3,500, if you aim to lose a pound of fat a week, all you would have to do is go into a 500 calorie deficit per day. 500 calories over 7 days is 3,500. If you're losing that per day on average, that's a pound a week. You want to lose 2 pounds? 1,000 calorie deficit per day. That would make it 7,000 calories, 2 pounds, easy math. But it's not recommended for you to do more than 2 pounds per week or 2% of your body weight. So you definitely don't want to go into a deficit that leads you to less than 1,000 calories per day. That is very ill-advised. It would definitely lead to health consequences. I personally wouldn't even go under 1,500. I mean, even at 2,000, honestly, I'm starving. Generally, I eat around 3,500 to 4,500 a day, but because of my physical activity, it lowers that, and then my basal metabolic rate is around 2,000. So I'm currently eating at a deficit at 3,000 calories, meaning I'm going to be losing about a pound or 2 pounds a week. Thankfully, you do have 2 options for calories. You can either burn more or eat less. So if you find that going into a deficit is too hard, then just crank up your exercising. But if cranking it up is too much, then just eat less. You don't really want to go full throttle on either, just do a combination of both. Simply, I love eating, man. So for me, I'll probably crank back the eating a tiny bit, but I'll crank up the exercising a ton. That's what works for me, so that's what I'll be doing. Make sure you sub for a transformation. If you're liking this video so far, please give me a like, and then we'll move on to tip number 7. Just like when you're trying to reach other goals in fitness, whether it's size or strength, consistency is king with fat loss. You generally don't want to try and speed run fat loss because it doesn't help you build up healthy habits that keeps that fat off. That's why you see contestants on the show The Biggest Loser gain it all back just as quickly as they lost it. Sometimes they even gain more than they started with. You want to aim to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week or 1%, whichever is manageable for you. Consistency is king. If your only goal is to have abs, you already have them. The truth is that everyone is made of stone, just most are wrapped in a bit of pudding, myself included. You cannot outrun a bad diet. Abs are made in the kitchen, and you'd be better off trying to eat healthy than trying to outpace a poor diet by working out like crazy. Not eating something unhealthy is easier than eating something unhealthy and then trying to work it off. Because in all likelihood, neither one of us is going to try and work off something poor that we just ate. Eating something sweet like a plain glazed donut, I go nuts for donuts, is something like 200 calories. So to work that off, you would have to run at that 8.6 miles an hour for 8 minutes, or walking that 3 miles an hour for a little under 30 minutes. And let's face it, we're not gonna do that after eating a donut. We're gonna feel kind of groggy, lazy, and just generally feel like that's not worth the time. It's just one donut. Having a double scoop protein shake is around 240 calories, but at least that way you get around 50 grams of protein with those calories. Whereas with that donut, purely calories. That all being said, On my fat loss journey, I won't be changing my diet so much as just eating a little bit less. Which leads me to focusing on your protein intake will help curb your appetite and keep you within your calorie goals per day. You can take it to the extreme with something like the carnivore diet, but I generally just have 2 meals a day, making sure that both are really packed with protein and then drinking the rest with shakes. I usually have around 2 double scoop shakes a day, which give me around 96 grams of protein, and then I eat the remaining 90 grams just in my other 2 meals. If you're watching this, I'm assuming you're not lean. For us, we have to eat 1 gram of protein per lean body mass. You don't really have to intake protein for any fat mass. If you happen to be watching this for entertainment purposes and you're like under 15% body fat or something, just eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And then if you want to gain muscle, you're supposed to eat 1 gram of protein for your goal weight. I could possibly take in around 270 grams of protein per day if I supplemented heavy with shakes, but generally eating actual food is better. Protein satiates you for longer than most foods, meaning you stay fuller for longer with protein, which is generally why something like a shake is better than a donut. Personally, I like drinking shakes just because if I had to eat all my protein from actual food, I don't even know if I have the appetite for that. Eating the 180 grams daily would be something like 30 eggs, a 24-ounce steak, or 9 cans of tuna every single day. And maybe I could do any of those things, but that is a ton of extra calories, and I don't know that I can afford that. Shakes are pretty cheap. Last tip, don't foo yuck and quit over one slip. It's okay to have a binge every once in a while, but move on from it and then keep on. Consistency is king. But avoiding going to a buffet with friends just because you're trying to lose some fat sucks. Just go, man. It's one day. It will not destroy you. You're trying to lose some fat, not lose all the joy out of your life. It is a process, but you don't have to hate it the whole way through or even at all. You should make it easy enough for you to maintain. This needs to be a lifestyle rather than a phase or season of your life. I hope all that was helpful for you. As always, stay hungry. but not for food, for lifting.